Ukrainian attacks that we've seen.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much. US Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff has emphasized the clear need for deadlines in the next phase of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire talks. Speaking ahead of his trip to Qatar, Witkoff stated that all things are on the table if Hamas agrees to disarm and leave Gaza. Witkoff also condemned the conditions in which hostages are being held, calling and deplorable. He praised Qatar's mediation efforts and acknowledged the support of Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The talks aim to secure the release of more hostages following a temporary ceasefire that saw 33 hostages freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Both Israel and Hamas have expressed optimism as negotiations continue. We are joined once again.
Well, President Zelensky sent a letter to the president. I think the president thought that it was a really good, positive first step. And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. So the city's moving around a little bit, but it will be Saudi Arabia. And I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
We are joined once again by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent. Joshua, thank you for joining us once again. Deadlines, that has been the word that Steve Witkoff has used. Why in the past have these been a serious problem, and what can we get from these statements about the ceasefire deal moving forward into its next phase?
Yes, well, of course, we have seen the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal come to an end, but we must also acknowledge that all-out fighting hasn't resumed. But throughout the ceasefire phase one, there were, of course, calls from either side that the ceasefire wasn't being followed. Hamas releasing hostages late, not giving lists. Israel reportedly infringing in Gaza and continuing military action when they were meant to have stopped. Both sides have played a blame game, but where we sit at the moment is a true impasse. We have no new ceasefire deal that has been agreed. We have hostages still remaining under Hamas control and being held by Hamas. Israel, of course, want those hostages to be released. On the flip side, aid going into Gaza has also stopped. So the situation in Gaza on the ground is extremely difficult. Food, medical supplies, water is very, very low. And the people living in Gaza, of course, are living in already difficult conditions given the level of devastation that we've seen across the Strip. So a real difficult time, but it seems that all parties are looking to get to the negotiating table. Again, it will be interesting to see how these talks unfold. We know Hamas have spoken with the US in recent days, specifically around a US-Israeli hostage, who Hamas have said they may release in support for a new ceasefire deal. It seems both sides are looking towards a ceasefire, but currently can't come to an agreement on how to get there.
Joshua, Witkoff praised the Arab nations, including the UAE, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt. What has been their role throughout this whole process?
Well, the Saudi nations, of course, have been there in the background. The Arab nations, they're, of course, more aligned with Muslim nations. And Gaza, of course, is Palestinians are predominantly Muslim. So the support has been there throughout, but recently we have seen them come up with a proposal, a plan, an Egypt plan, which has been backed by the Arab nations, really looking at what to do with Gaza once a permanent ceasefire and an end to the war is agreed. Now, there's a $53 billion plan that has been put to the table by Egypt and backed by these Arab nations. It would see a 5-year plan that would not need the displacement of Gazans. Now, on the flip side, of course, Trump has come up with his own plan, the Riviera of the Middle East, backed by Israel, which would see mass displacement, potentially of millions of Palestinians living in Gaza. So the plan after any ceasefire is sort of set. There are 2 options on the table. There might be other options that come up, but clearly the main thing that needs to happen now is everyone needs to sit down and a discussion needs to be had on what you can do to get to that point where a future plan is necessary. Because while Israeli hostages are being held, while the situation in Gaza is what it is and aid isn't getting in and Hamas are still running, let's be honest, for Israel, they want to see Hamas disbanded and out of Gaza. I think until that happens, we won't be talking about any future plan.
Joshua Barnes, once again, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to some news updates from the United States.